with my background being on the HVAC side, there was definitely some doubt, like, do I really want to get into this trade because it is a lot of hard work. Having that background, and I'm a licensed engineer as well, and so that was able to help me get a contractor's license, which you need to be able to buy an HVAC business.
Welcome to the Before You Buy or Sell a Business podcast, where we help buyers and sellers learn more about the acquisition process, discuss recent transactions, and stay up to date on the latest news in the market. Here's your host, Jared Johnson.
Okay, so welcome back to Before You Buy or Sell a Business podcast. I've got Jason on today, and Jason did something that a lot of people are really trying to do. He actually bought 2 businesses over about a 2-year period. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I appreciate you having me.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. I appreciated working with you. You were very easy to work with. I remember my closers kind of saying, well, that was easy. We got the transaction done pretty quick, and you were on to taking over the business. So we appreciate that.
Awesome. Yeah, likewise. I appreciate all the help. And when I was looking for a partner that could get us across the finish line, and you were able to do that for us twice. So it was great.
Cool. All right. So before we get into what you bought and how you did it and everything, maybe you could give us an idea of your background, where you grew up. Did you go to college? What were you kind of doing before you got into this crazy world?
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in the panhandle of Texas, Canyon, Texas. A lot of people know Paladero Canyon, outdoor adventure people that go up there hiking and camping. But that's where I grew up, a town of about 15,000 people. And I ended up going to Texas A&M, and I studied mechanical engineering. And a lot of the people that I studied with there ended up in Houston in the oil and gas industry. So that's kind of what I thought my trajectory was. But I graduated in 2009, and there was, I guess, a downturn in the economy there. And so jobs were really hard to come by. And long story short, I ended up at an engineering consulting firm here in Houston, and I was designing HVAC systems. And so really not the path that I thought I would go down, but it's within the field of mechanical engineering. And so I was able to use my studies in heat transfer and thermodynamics and all that fun stuff. So yeah, spent quite a bit of time in the HVAC design world, and did a lot of schools, commercial buildings in terms of office buildings, restaurants. Got to be a part of some really cool projects. And then after a little while doing that, I kind of wanted to kind of change things up a little bit. And I ended up in the consulting space, and worked with a lot of architects and engineers, and just helping them with digital technologies for designing buildings, and eventually started my own consulting business, and kind of started to shift toward helping the trades. And so I was working with engineers still, but I was also working with a lot of the big mechanical and electrical contractors around the country. And so really got to be a part of some really cool projects. That was really fun. Really enjoyed that. I was traveling a lot at that time. So that was 2017, 2018, 2019, I guess. And then we hit 2020, and everything kind of shuts down, right? And so I was all over the place traveling, and then all of a sudden it just all came to a halt. And there was a lot of question marks as to, like, okay, what's the future going to look like in this space? Having been working with a lot of mechanical contractors at that time, I started thinking, well, do I want to help them build their businesses, or maybe I could build my own business? And so that's when I really got to thinking about, okay, what do I want to do with my career? So yeah, sorry, now I'm kind of getting into the acquisition
No,
part.
you're
But yeah,
good.
that's
You're
kind of
good.
my
Yeah.
background.
Yeah, it's a great background. I got to ask you, so since you went to A&M, do you wear the ring?
I do, yeah.
There you go. I always think that's funny. Whenever I talk to people and just kind of like, hey, did you have your ring on? Of course, yeah, here you go. So it's kind of fun to see, great school, definitely well known for engineering, ag, all kinds of, very interesting things. And they seem to pump out a lot of very successful people. So glad to see there was another one coming out of there. So, all
Yeah,
right. So yeah, of course. So you had, a great kind of background in HVAC. I would say that 99% of the people that end up buying something in the HVAC industry were not an engineer, were not designing the systems. They were either some other form of business where they said, "Hey, I want to get into this trade because it's popular." You had, like kind of a different side of experience with it. So I'm guessing that's why you wanted to buy specifically the HVAC refrigeration type business.
Yeah. I guess one more thing I'll mention in my background. So my dad, he always had his own business and more self-employed, and so he had some flexibility there. He definitely worked hard in everything that he did, but there was always kind of that desire to have my own business. And so when I was even when I had my consulting business, I was always kind of researching, like, what businesses to get into that can where you can have a little more, freedom in your lifestyle, and not just, working 24/7 to grow a business. And with my background being on the HVAC side, there was definitely some doubt, like, do I really want to get into this trade, because it is a lot of hard work. Having that background, and I'm a licensed engineer as well, and so that was able to help me get a contractor's license, which you need to be able to buy an HVAC business, or, well, at least with the SBA program. And so I kind of saw that as I guess, a competitive advantage for myself, being able to jump into that space where maybe a lot of these investors kind of have that disadvantage. There are ways to do it, obviously, but, to get into a trade, you really need to know what you're doing there. And so I saw that as an advantage to kind of be able to continue that path in kind of the HVAC world, and just kind of take it into the home service side of things.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I feel like people are always trying to kind of find a little bit of a leg up on how to kind of get their foot in the door with some of these. And then, especially in the trades, right? They've been extremely competitive, really difficult to find, a deal that many other people aren't looking at. I was just talking to one of my friends, Alex. He works in with private equity, and he was explaining it's basically the same problem from the very small transactions all the way up to the large ones. There's a lot of competition for HVAC businesses, so I'm guessing that probably gave you a little bit of a leg up. I'm sure we can kind of talk about how you connected with the seller and all of that. Maybe you could explain to us how you found the business listed, and then kind of what you did at the beginning to spend some time looking at it, and then maybe also get into if you had talked to, or if you had looked at any other businesses before you found the one that you ended up buying, the first one.
Yeah, that's a good question. So probably starting in early 2020, when some of the shutdowns were really coming into effect, I just started kind of browsing online, just kind of casually, I guess. Um, and there was quite a bit out there, but a lot of it was, just kind of a one man shop that was looking to sell his customer list, is really what it was. But they thought it was worth a lot more than what, the industry would say, or the marketplace, I guess. But so there was a lot of that, and I ended up talking to quite a few guys out there. There was actually one deal that I was kind of pursuing, and it was a lot more on the commercial side of things, but his numbers just weren't in a good spot, and it was going to take a lot of work to kind of turn things around to get the cash flow where it needed to be. It was just super risky. Really couldn't find a kind of a good fit until late 2022, or sorry, late 2021. I found Uniserve Air Conditioning. It was just a listing. I can't even remember what. I feel like most of the brokers, they listed on, every site that's available, and
Yeah.
so I saw it in multiple platforms out there. And I think what kind of caught my attention was that the previous owner of Uniserve, he had a full time job at Shell, and he kind of ran it on the side. What intrigued me about that was that it wasn't something where I'd have to jump in and be taking service calls from day one to keep things moving forward. And so there was at least some type of system in place to where there was another technician or two that could kind of run the show, and then I could focus on starting to grow it. And so that was kind of what I was looking for, where, I'm not just buying another job, if you will, and having to run service calls and put in ACs right from the beginning. And so that's what attracted me to Uniserve from from when I saw it, and then just reached out to the broker, and we had coffee with the owner, and just sat down and just chatted, and yeah, he's just kind of an old school AC guy, and just real down to earth, and we got along really well. He had put me in contact with you and maybe a few other guys. I think, yeah, you said, hey, this looks pretty good, and kind of gave me some parameters, and I said, all right, let's go for it. And then, yeah, he accepted the deal, and we were kind of off and running.
Awesome. When you were looking, like at what point, I guess when you were kind of browsing, did you say, okay, I'm gonna, kind of turn this into more of like a serious search, or were you always doing that from the beginning?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess I kind of skipped that part. If I started in 2020, and then it was really almost 2 years before I put in an offer, I think 2020 I was still trying to figure out, okay, what do things look like with my consulting business? And I think in 2020 I had started some conversations with a couple other businesses that just never really went anywhere. I guess one more thing I'll mention, that there was a book that I read during that time called Buy Then Build. I'm trying to remember the exact line, but basically at one point it was like, hey, you're either serious or you're not, and so either do it or stop messing with it, and so I was like, hey, if this is what I want to do, then it's just time to go for it. And so summer of 2021 was when I really started to get serious about it, and like, hey, you got to do something, or figure something else out.
Yeah. Do you feel like during your search, you felt maybe a little discouraged at all based on the amount of businesses that you were looking at? And if so, if you had somebody come to you and say, kind of like, "Hey, I'm been doing this for a while. I'm kind of burned out." We get a lot of people that will start their search. They're really excited. They're looking at a bunch of deals. They've got very clear kind of guidelines for themselves. And then a year later, they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm exhausted. Like, I'm just going to take the next deal that comes along. And we're trying to get them like, hey, remember what you were looking for? Let's stay there. So I don't know if you experienced that at all.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think looking back now with some of the deals that I saw early on, I think if some of those would have gone through, somehow, some way, if did work out, I think I would have crashed and burned. And so I think that you have to look at, okay, where am I at in my life in terms of financial position, and then your time commitment, with your family, whatever it may be, right? To where you can say, hey, these are my parameters, and I think you really need to stick to those, because if you start to if you start to throw some of them out the door just to jump into a deal, it could end up very bad quickly. And I think the last thing you want when you jump into a new business is for it to go sideways. And so different industries are different, but I think you have to really define those parameters for yourself, your family, your life stage, and you really need to stick to those, because you don't want it to go sideways. And I could definitely see some of those deals that I was looking at early on. If I was going to jump into it just to get into it, I don't think I'd still be going today with those.
Yeah, that's some great advice. Often people, they just get tired and just say, I'm going to take the next thing. And it's really the wrong way to go. So thanks for sharing that. So, all right. So we'll get back to the first transaction. So you had coffee with the seller, broker. We kind of looked at the deal, said, hey, this will work from a financing standpoint. How did the negotiations go? And was there ever a point where you maybe got stuck, or was it pretty easy just to kind of move forward with the seller?
Yeah, he was, I guess, very motivated. He was ready to be done with it. Looking back now, I remember he said, I can't go through another Houston summer. And so I think he was ready to get out of that. And so things on his end went as quickly as they could. And yeah, there were some things, negotiations took, I don't know, a week or two, because there were some things that we put in place to, I really wanted to make sure that one of the technicians that he had on board wasn't going to leave. And so we were just talking through, yeah, what could we put in place to kind of in the deal, from a financial standpoint to keep him around, and just some different things like that. But really, it went pretty smooth. Like I said before, I never really got too deep into making an offer, but just some of those meetings with the previous sellers, I don't know, they just weren't very motivated. And so they just never really took off. Whereas with Uniserve, the previous owner, he was very motivated and ready to get a deal done.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was probably a good thing that you at least kind of got some reps under your belt on the first ones, because then you kind of knew, okay, this is what I'm looking for on, the one that's going to work. These ones aren't the right fit, but now I've got one that is, so I kind of understand what's important. You mentioned that you wanted to keep one of the kind of key employees on. What did you end up doing to kind of make sure that happened?
Um, One of the technicians, Randy, which he's still with me today, he had been with Uniserve for 25 years. And
Wow.
so he knew everybody in the customer base, right? And so I was like, man, if we were to lose him early on, we'd be in trouble. What we did is we worked out basically a bonus structure to where if he was still there after 6 months, yeah, I'll just share the number. So he'd get $25,000, and then if he was there a year into the deal, he'd get another $25,000, and and we kind of worked that into the whole deal, right? And so the owner, he wanted a certain amount, and then we agreed to the $50,000 in total package to keep Randy around that way. And it was all based on, he had to be in good standing, and, he couldn't just like, not show up to work and stuff like that. Right. As long as he kept doing what he was doing, and was in good standing with the company, then those, those bonuses were on the table for him. Brought me a little bit of comfort knowing that there was some incentive there for him to stick around, and help me as we transitioned into the business.
Well, it sounds like it worked for everybody. Oftentimes, when I'm talking to somebody, they are nervous about keeping a very valuable employee around, and so it sounded like it worked for everybody. You kind of probably helped the seller feel a little bit better about selling the business and leaving Randy, and then Randy was happy because he was going to be able to make some more money, and he knew he had a home. You were happy because you ended up having a very valuable employee that was, very low likelihood that they were going to leave, especially if they're incentivized to stay. And of course, the bank was happy because now you've got Randy there that's going to help you with the transition in the business. So I think that it worked out really well for everybody involved.
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, looking back now, I do think it was kind of gave everybody some comfort, because John, the previous owner, I mean, him and Randy were close. They worked together for um, 25 years, however, I can't remember the exact time frame, but so they were really close. And so I think it was tough for John to kind of leave Randy, because he wanted to make sure that he was going to be taken care of. And then Randy, being a little bit older, I think maybe had some concerns about, well, if I have to go look for another job, am I going to be able to do things the way that I've been able to, and have these relationships? And so yeah, I think it just brought everybody a level of comfort to kind of be like, hey, we can move this thing forward.
Yeah, I would say that's the number one reason that sellers are hesitant to sell. Besides just kind of going through the process of all the paperwork and everything, it's usually that they've developed really good relationships with their staff and they feel like they're leaving them behind. So it sounds like that was a good way to get it to work. So you closed on the transaction. If I remember correctly, it went fairly smooth. Wasn't too challenging, unless it's been a couple years and I can't remember of all the deals. But um, if you had some advice for someone that's going to kind of start the process with a lender, or even just kind of doing some due diligence and going through the negotiations, what would you tell them to kind of focus on?
I think having all of your stuff in order is a great place to start in terms of all your financials and tax returns, and just making sure that all of your stuff is in good standing and good order, because that's um, having gone through the process twice, like, man, there's so much paperwork. And so just having all your basics, I guess, accessible, like I have just a secure drive on, where I have all my tax returns and financial, all that stuff, right? That's a big part of it. And then when reviewing a business, I think, there are some things that you can see in their financials that are things in pretty good order, right? If they use QuickBooks, like that's huge, right? Because they have all the reports there. This business, John did a great job of keeping everything, doing things the right way. I'm sure you've seen this where some owners, they use their business bank account to pay for their personal credit card every month, and whatever, car payment, miscellaneous stuff like that, and it's like, wait, how does that factor into a true P&L, and trying to figure that out. And so if they have everything separated and just the business stuff is the business stuff and it's all in QuickBooks, man, it really helped things go pretty smooth, from my standpoint.
That's great. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I probably see that 15 times a day. And frankly, I'm kind of sick of it. There's just yeah, we could talk for 3 hours about that, I'm sure. But yeah, if you're a seller and you're going to be selling and you are not operating your business properly from a financial standpoint, clean it up. Spend a year or two trying to clean up the books, and you will get a much higher price for your business, and you'll have a much easier transaction. So you ended up closing. How did it go with the transition period?
It was pretty smooth. It was a ton of work because I still had my consulting business going, because I still had to, provide for myself and my family. And so I still had quite a bit of projects on the books, if you will, that I still had to fulfill. And it's like, boom, okay, here's Uniserve now, this business that you got to run. And so I was able to rely on Randy. Randy, it was huge just having him there, and just that consistency of taking care of the customers. I brought on another technician from the beginning that was huge in that transition process. He didn't have a ton of experience in the field, but he was a little bit older, a little bit more mature in terms of just being able to interact with customers. And so that was huge. And so Uniserve wasn't this massive company by any means, but we still had, 4, 5, 6 service calls every single day that we had to keep, taking care of people and keep being able to execute those calls. And so it was just, yeah, trying to keep that going. And then there's all the transition stuff, like, vehicle titles and getting those things updated, and getting accounts transferred over. And yeah, it was a lot of work, but at the end of the day, it wasn't anything that we couldn't manage. And I had a couple guys that I could rely on and trust to kind of keep some things rolling while I was still working the consulting projects and trying to finish those out. So yeah, I think it went pretty smooth overall.
Great. Yeah. So that was in 2022. And then at what point did you say, okay, I'm ready to add on another one?
2022, that was May of 2022 when I closed on Uniserve. And really, that I would say that the remainder of that year was just really trying to be like, okay, there's only so much you can kind of read about. And once you're actually in the driver's seat, if you will, there's just, you learn a whole lot more. And so 2022 was really just kind of figuring things out. And then going into 2023, we're like, okay, I think we got this figured out. Now let's try to grow this thing a little bit. And so at that point, we were trying to find another technician, but that didn't really pan out. But nonetheless, we kind of had a good team in place, and we just wanted to kind of grow it and run with it, what we had. And by the time we got to the end of 2023, we felt really comfortable. I felt really comfortable with, like, okay, here's what we need to do to be successful week in and week out. And I had really been looking at different ways to grow. There's word of mouth, which we were utilizing as much as we could, trying to encourage people to share with their neighbors, family, friends. But that only goes so fast, right? That takes a lot of time, over time, I guess, for that to really go into effect. Then you have all the social media, digital media, ads, paid ads, so many outlets there that sometimes can feel like a black hole where you're just throwing money out there and it's just disappearing, right? never really found a great outlet there where we felt like, hey, if we put so much money here, it's really going to help us grow. I mean, there are certain things, not to get too deep in the weeds on digital marketing, but there's just so much out there, and you can really waste a lot of money if you really don't know what you're doing. And so anyways, I guess where I'm getting at then is kind of once we were getting to the end of 2023, we're like, well, um, maybe I should look at acquiring another company, because there's still this kind of older generation that's in the trade that's looking to retire from the trade. And so let me start kind of reaching out to those guys again. And so I just kind of started searching again. Then yeah, as we get into early 2024, which is earlier this year, that's when I ended up meeting the owners of Advantage Mechanical, which is the second business that I bought out in April of 2024. So really, it was just a matter of, as I was looking at kind of what we were doing on the digital marketing side and some of the ad campaigns, and it's like, well, we can spend X amount of dollars here and it'll help us grow this amount, or we could take that money and put it toward buying out another business, and that'll help us gain X number of customers. And at the end of the day, that was the route that I decided to go to help us to kind of take that next step of growth.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. I don't feel like people kind of consider that. Maybe they do just in a roundabout way, but it definitely makes more sense if, especially in a hyper competitive environment that you're in, trying to gain customers. And like you mentioned, I mean, I talked to somebody the other day that's doing epoxy flooring, and they're like, I spend so much money on advertising through Facebook and everything else that I wish I could take my business back down to what it was before, because before I did that, I was actually had a really big profit margin. And now it feels like I'm just feeding this machine to bring me more leads. And I could have just stayed where I was at, almost made the same amount of money. And so they're kind of on this treadmill and just have to keep going. So it's very interesting to think about it. If you've already got existing customers and you've already got kind of a brand or some market share in a specific area, if you acquire that company, you're basically buying that customer base, that market share, rather than trying to go after that and convert an existing customer to come over to you. So I'm glad that kind of clicked for you and made sense.
I think as humans, we're creatures of habit, right? And if you think about, this is something that I tell our team, like, how many times do people really think about their AC? To be honest, they don't want to think about their AC. They just want it to work, right? And then, they a lot of people have the guy that they call when something does go bad, or maybe they have their annual maintenance plan, which we offer and stay on top of all that, right? But for the most part, like, people want their AC company that they can trust, that are going to take care of them. They really don't want to change. And so we just got to do a good job of building that relationship and keep taking care of them. And then, the flip side of that is, well, how do you grow? How many people are, scrolling through social media, their Facebook feed, and want to watch AC ads, or somebody tell them about replacing their AC? Like, it just, it's really not something people want to do, from my experience, sitting on this side of it. And so acquiring another company that already has those relationships and has that customer base that they've been taken care of and want to keep being taken care of by this company, it's just it really worked out for us in terms of growth, as like you said before, because with like Meta ads or Google ads, or, man, it just feels like you're dumping a lot of money into those systems and not getting a lot of return.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So, from the first transaction to the second one, was there anything specifically that you felt like you wanted to do differently on the second transaction that maybe you applied through negotiation or in the purchase agreement or anything like that? Or did you feel like the first one went pretty well and you just kind of wanted to replicate that?
Yeah, really, I think the first one went really well. It went really smooth, and so I was looking for something very similar. I think I'm sure it's different with each industry, but there's kind of if you're a small business, say revenue less than $1 million, like, and no real estate, and things are very cut and dry, and a couple vehicles and a customer database, like things really go pretty smooth. I've never done a deal with real estate. I think that would probably add some additional hoops to jump through. And so I really didn't want any real estate. I was just looking for something, under $1 million in revenue, a really large customer base. I kind of had some benchmarks that I was looking for, and just, yeah, long-standing relationships with that customer base, a technician or two that we could rely on to bring on board and keep maintaining that customer base. And Advantage Mechanical kind of fit that criteria. And yeah, once again, the sellers were very motivated. They were, that was back in April, right? And so they're like, I don't want to go through another summer. We got
There's
to
a
get this done.
good piece of advice there. If you're buying something in HVAC or refrigeration, start looking at the beginning of the year, because they're probably starting to think about, oh no, here comes the crazy humidity and heat of Texas that somehow we all forget in the middle of winter when it's 25 degrees, like how hot it gets in the summertime. Yeah,
Yeah.
my in-laws moved, and I'm in North Texas, but so a little bit less humidity, but it's still really hot. And my in-laws moved here in July, and until about a week ago, my mother-in-law asked me about 15 times, "Are you sure it gets cold here?" And I said, "Yeah, just wait, just wait." And then one day I wake up and she's like going to work out or something, and I get a text message and it's just the emoji of the guy freezing, and I was like, "There you go, finally found it." So yeah, which still gives you some work to do, so that's good. So, well,
Yeah.
I'm glad that one worked out as well. And then I know one thing that was great was you got to take advantage of the expansion program for SBA, so we're able to do it without you bringing much cash to the table. And then we were still able to give you some working capital. So that was a wonderful way of kind of adding on without having to come out of pocket with a bunch of cash. We'd rather you hang on to your liquidity and get you some working capital. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I wasn't even aware of that until, I can't remember when we touched base. Maybe it was the end of 2023, and you kind of laid that out. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. let's do it.
yeah, it was something new at that point anyway. So it was good to get you to be able to take advantage of it. One thing that I know a lot of people are starting to really pay more attention to, which is great. Having done this for a really long time, we didn't have people that were really, really concerned about working capital, 10, 15 years ago. Now I'm seeing it a lot more where they're building it into the deal or the bank's providing it, but there's become a better focus on it. When you took over, the first one, the second one, did you have any issues with that at all? If somebody's thinking about needing working capital, maybe you could provide a little bit of advice on kind of how to manage that.
I'm sure each industry is a little bit different, and even on the HVAC side, it varies quite a bit from residential to commercial. And just for example, like on the commercial side, if a lot of these large commercial clients that we have, it may be 90, 120 days before we get paid on anything. Whereas with our vendors, we're paying every 30 days. At the end of the month, we're getting the bill from them, right? And so, and this equipment, these packaged rooftop units, those things can be quite expensive, 10, 15 grand. You just have to kind of run your numbers and figure out how much cash you're going to need. On the residential side, the great thing about residential is we get paid right when the job's done, and so there's not as much need for as much working capital on the residential side. And so I think it's just knowing the business that you're in, knowing those numbers, and planning ahead, because yeah, I think like kind of what I was talking about earlier with that one deal early on that was strictly commercial. Man, I was going to need like 250,000 in working capital just to kind of keep the doors open while we tried to kind of turn the ship around, right? Because it was kind of heading in the wrong direction. And that was part of what it just wasn't going to work out, because by the time we buy the business, you get the working capital, the numbers just didn't work out. Whereas with Uniserve, we definitely got some working capital, but we didn't need. I think we got like 50,000 working capital. So we didn't need, a tremendous amount, and the ship was already headed in the right direction. We just needed to help to grow it. So yeah, I think it's just knowing the business, knowing the industry, and having a good plan in place for making sure you have the right amount of working capital. I wasn't coming to the table as, somebody with hundreds of thousands in the bank either, where I could kind of rely on that. And so that was part of my calculations as well, as like, hey, what am I going to need? And if things don't go quite as planned, having a little bit of wiggle room there, and yeah, just making sure we had a good plan in place.
Great, yeah. So did you end up combining the two and changing one of the names, or did you keep them separate? And what was kind of your strategy there?
So the first business was Uniserve Air Conditioning, and that's really what we operate as today. And so when we brought on Advantage Mechanical, we still created the DBA for Advantage Mechanical, put it under the same LLC, all that good stuff. But really early on with the residential customers, we sent out a letter, postcard, emails, all that stuff, and said Advantage Mechanical is merging with Uniserve Air Conditioning, and we kind of told the whole story, right? The previous owners, they're looking to retire from the HVAC business, and here we are as Uniserve. Here's who we are. Here's what we're about. We're still here to take care of you, and I think it was well received. Looking in the database, I mean, there was a couple of people that didn't call us back, but for the most part, all of the maintenance customers stayed on board. We still got calls from those customers this summer when they had issues. The Advantage Mechanical also had a pretty large commercial client base as well. And so on that side, commercial is a little bit different. And so we actually kind of wrote out that Advantage Mechanical kind of business, if you will, for through this past summer. And we kind of operated as Advantage Mechanical with those commercial customers. Once we were kind of in there 3 or 4 times, working with them and getting to know them, then we kind of shared, hey, here's what's happened, and hey, we've been doing this for a few months for you now. We're the same guys. We're just, we're going to change the name on the invoice now. And they were like, oh, okay, cool. And
Yeah,
so,
no, that was smart of you too, though, to kind of figure out how to do it the right way. If you would have done it right away, they may have kind of been like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" So it was smart of you to kind of figure out how to do it and when to do it at the right time.
kind of like we were talking about earlier, I think humans are just, they like things to stay the same. And so we didn't want to, spook them, for a lack of a better term, to where they're like, wait a minute, who are you? What's going on? And so when we're able to walk through the door with some of the Advantage Mechanical people, and then just throw in, a Uniserve guy here or there, and then, before you know it, it's, Uniserve and Advantage Mechanical guys. Because I think at the end of the day, people just want to be taken care of. And when they have those relationships, and they know that, hey, you're not trying to pull something over on them. We're just guys that live right down the road from you, taking care of your location, and then I think people feel comfortable with that. And yeah, as long as you do a good job and be trustworthy, then they can trust you.
Cool. Yeah, definitely makes sense. So it's been 7, 8 months now. How do you feel it's going now? I mean, are you kind of past that tough spot of getting everything transitioned over and really focus on growing again?
I think so. Yeah. It's been a really good year for us. So actually, not to kind of get too deep in the weeds, but I think a lot of just from what we've heard, at least in the Houston area, there's been a lot of HVAC businesses struggle this year. I think the economy has been tough on a lot of people, and it's kind of the small little one-man shops. I think it's been tough on them because people just haven't wanted to replace their equipment or kind of put as much money into it as maybe they have in the previous years. And so it's hurt a lot of these smaller businesses. But thankfully we've done really well, and just trying to continue with our focus of just taking care of people. And if people don't have money to spend, hey, we're going to do the best we can to fix it for them and keep things going for them. And so it's been a really good year for us. I think moving into 2025, we want to try to continue to expand on what we're doing. And yeah, I've been going through resumes this morning for technicians, trying to hire somebody here at the first of the year. Yeah, we're looking to grow, continue to grow, and There's actually two guys that I'm kind of in talks with about potentially buying them out. I don't know. I don't know how that'll turn out, but now that I've done two deals, like a lot of there's a decent amount of people in the area that are kind of like, hey, the guy at Uniserve, he's willing to to work with people and buy out these small businesses, and so I've had a few people come my way talking about it, and so yeah, who knows? We'll see what happens.
I mean, it's worked twice. Hopefully you can keep doing it. I like to see that you kind of got your feet under you and then said, okay, I'm ready. So the more you do it, probably the easier it gets. And I'm assuming sometime soon you'll call me and say, hey, I'm ready to do this again. So that's usually kind of how it goes. So I'm excited to hear that, how that'll go as well. So it's been great having you on. You've provided a lot of great information. At the end, I always ask two questions. So first one is, do you have a mentor, or have you ever had a mentor?
I would say, yeah, there's a lot of guys that I can point to, mainly at church. And so my family and I, we go to church every Sunday. And so I can look back just over the past 10 years and, think of 3 or 4 guys that have really just made a huge impact on my life from multiple aspects, right? From my faith to leadership to, you name it, just being a husband and a dad. So that I can really point to a few guys there. The other side is just, reading books. Like I read a lot of Dave Ramsey, listen to his podcast. He's always got a ton of stuff to share on the leadership side, on his EntreLeadership stuff. And there's a handful of other guys that I read and, their books and listen to podcasts and whatnot. I don't know that I can point to like one guy, but multiple guys that have really mentored me over the past couple decades.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And then final question, what motivates you?
Life is so short, and the time that I have here, I just, I want to do the best that I can. So yeah, I'm always just driven to try to be better. Back to the previous question, I didn't mention my dad, but obviously my dad has made a tremendous impact on my life, and he kind of put me in a position to do better than he was able to do. And that's what I want to do with my boys. I have 2 boys, and I just want us to have a good life, but a life that where we work hard and earn everything that we have, and I can put them in a position to kind of take that next step and be better than what I was able to do.
Perfect answer. I love it. So cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today and spending time. I know you're very busy, and I'm glad we were able to help you out. And I'm really, really looking forward to the next time we get to do this, when you add on another 1 or 2 or 3 of these. So you're going to be successful, I can tell. And again, thank you very much.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Jared. Yeah, it's been a tremendous help having you help me with these 2 acquisitions, and I'm very grateful for that.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. We hope you found this podcast informative and helpful. Please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. For more information, or if you'd like to discuss a transaction, please go to www.jaredwjohnson.com.